My brother Marcus started his business 3 years before I started mine. For a long time, that felt like an unfair, unbeatable number. 3 years, just sitting there, a head start I couldn't do anything about except watch it get bigger. His company runs almost entirely without him now. Mine still can't survive a single sick day without falling apart. I used to think the difference between us was simply time. More years, more progress, a straight line I was permanently behind on, but the closer I looked, the more I realized that wasn't actually true. A business isn't one long stretch of the same work getting easier. It's 7 completely different jobs, stacked on top of each other, and the skills that get you through the first one are often useless, sometimes actively harmful, by the 5th. So I stopped counting years and started counting stages. This is every level of building a business. Level 1, the idea. Every business starts here, and at this stage, it isn't really a business yet. It's just a claim about the future, an idea, untested, unvalidated, built entirely out of assumptions about what people might want and what they might be willing to pay for it. There's no evidence yet. No customer has confirmed anything. It's just a napkin sketch, a late-night conversation, a hunch you can't quite let go of. Marcus started here too. Everyone does, no matter how big the thing eventually becomes. The tempting mistake at this level is believing the idea itself is the hard part, the rare and valuable ingredient everything else depends on. It isn't. Ideas are genuinely abundant. What's rare is what happens at every level after this one. Level 2, the first sale. This is the first real piece of evidence, and it changes everything psychologically, even if the amount of money involved is small. Somebody, a stranger, someone with no obligation to be kind to you, actually pays for what you made. Not a friend doing you a favor, not a family member being polite. A real transaction, with real money changing hands, based on real perceived value. This is the moment an idea stops being a claim about the future and starts being a fact about the present. It doesn't guarantee anything about what comes next, but it's the first piece of proof that the thing you're building might actually be able to exist in the world outside your own head. Level 3, the solo operator. This is, statistically, the most dangerous stage of the entire climb, and almost nobody warns you about it clearly enough. At this level, the founder does everything: sales, delivery, customer support, bookkeeping, marketing, and a dozen other roles nobody mentioned when the idea felt exciting. Every hat sits on the same head all at once, and there's no one else to hand any of it to. This is where the majority of businesses that fail actually die, not from a bad idea, but from a founder who simply runs out of hours, energy, or willpower trying to be the entire company by themselves. Marcus told me this was the stage that nearly broke him, and I believed him immediately, because it was already starting to break me too. The grind here isn't a sign you're doing it wrong, it's just what this specific stage costs before the next one changes the math. Level 4, the first hire. This is the level where something counterintuitive happens. Bringing on your first hire doesn't immediately lighten the load. It often makes things harder for a while before it makes them easier. Teaching someone else how to do what you've been doing entirely from memory takes real time you were already short on at level 3. You have to slow down enough to explain a process you never actually wrote down anywhere, because you never needed to, it just lived in your head. This is also the level where founder identity gets tested for the first time. A lot of people, including me, tie a piece of their own self-worth to being personally necessary for everything to work. Letting someone else touch the thing you built by hand feels like a small loss, even when it's obviously the right move. Marcus said the workload actually spiked for him right here, exactly like it did for me, before it ever went down. Level 5, the systemized business. This is the level where the business stops depending entirely on what's inside the founder's head. Processes get written down, steps get documented. The knowledge that used to live only in memory starts existing somewhere else, in a document, a checklist, a repeatable system anyone on the team could theoretically follow. This sounds like a small administrative task, but it's actually one of the biggest shifts in the entire climb because it's the first point where the business becomes teachable instead of just doable. Marcus told me this was the level where he finally stopped being the bottleneck for every single decision, because for the first time, the answers didn't on. The team could theoretically follow. This sounds like a small administrative task, but it's actually one of the biggest shifts in the entire climb because it's the first point where the business becomes teachable instead of just doable. Marcus told me this was the level where he finally stopped being the bottleneck for every single decision, because for the first time, the answers didn't only exist in his own memory anymore. Level 6. The delegated business. At this level, a real team is running the day-to-day operations, and the founder's job fundamentally changes shape. It's no longer about doing the work. It's about making sure the systems built at level 5 are actually being followed, refined, and improved by people who aren't you. This requires a very specific kind of trust, the same delegation trust that shows up on every ladder in this series, but here it's aimed at something the founder personally built from nothing, which makes it feel even harder to loosen the grip on. Marcus described this stage as the first time he could take an actual week off without the business quietly falling apart behind him. I hadn't experienced that yet, but I was getting close. The final level, the owned asset. This is where Marcus has been standing this entire video. The level where the business runs and even grows without him present day to day. This is the real dividing line between a business and a job, even though from the outside they can look identical for years. A job requires you to show up. An owned asset doesn't. Every earlier stage, the idea, the first sale, the solo grind, the first hire, the systems, the delegation, all of it exists specifically to make the founder progressively less operationally necessary, until eventually the thing keeps running whether you're in the room or not. Reaching this level didn't feel like catching up to my brother. It felt like finally understanding what he'd actually built, underneath the version of it I could see from the outside. The big reveal. Here's what surprised me most about this entire climb. The 3-year head start was never really about time. It was about which of 7 specific stages Marcus had already survived. Time was just the unit the gap happened to get measured in from the outside, but the actual distance between us was always stages, not years. And stages, unlike years, can be closed faster than the original timeline once you actually understand what they are and stop treating the whole thing as one long, undifferentiated grind. The final lesson. If you're building something right now and it feels like it's taking forever, here's the thing worth remembering. You're probably not behind on time. You're at a specific stage, and that stage has a specific skill attached to it that gets you to the next one. The solo operator grind isn't a sign of failure. The workload spike after your first hire isn't a sign you did something wrong. They're just what those particular stages cost, and knowing that in advance is most of what makes them survivable. Marcus and I run businesses that look a lot more alike now than they used to. That doesn't mean the climbing stops. A business that runs itself just opens the door to the next thing worth building. If you're standing in the middle of your own solo operator stage right now, wondering if it ever gets easier, it does. It's just not the next few months. It's the next stage. There's another hidden system waiting in the next video.